Okay, so I know this is a very niche topic to talk about due to recent events, and I know YouTube is probably going to flag this video down for having modern content in it, modern themes, modern everything. But this is a topic I really want to talk about, so I'm making it anyway. World War III is a common theme and common conspiracy in many people. Some say that's gonna happen eventually, and due to the recent Russian Ukraine war, it's closer than ever before. But how would this war actually play out? How would it start? Now, I'm not going to be like, oh, it goes like this. I'm actually going to try and detail the events of how this war could potentially start. Not saying it will, but hypothetically. Okay, so this is a map of Europe, and this big one is Russia. Russia has is currently invading Ukraine, and they have occupied a lot of territories. Now, they could also potentially invade Moldova. Okay, so let's say that Putin eventually reestablishes the Soviet Union. Belarus would most likely join, but Russia will probably be the first country to, join, but Belarus will most likely come in far second. Belarus and Russia have a lot of things in common. They both used to be part of the Soviet Union. Both are run under hardcore dictatorship regimes. And both countries think that Ukraine is full of Nazis and they're about to genocide the Russian people. When in reality, Ukraine is not that. It is an innocent country that got taken advantage of back in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea and annexed it. This is Crimea right here. A dotted line can be seen, saying that it's technically a part of Russia, but also isn't. Now, let's say that Putin does hypothetically start this brand new Soviet Union. Russia and Belarus will be the first two party members, and if Russia successfully engulfs all of Ukraine, they could most likely be the third joining member. Now, keep this in mind. Russia and Ukraine were the first two countries to join the original Soviet Union. Hell, both were the first two to join even pre-Soviet Union. So, it's not hard to see how Ukraine will be the third joining member. Now, I've also heard some theories that Russia is also potentially going to invade Moldova, which they could potentially. So, and if they do, then Moldova will most likely be the fourth joining member of the Soviet Union. Now, I actually have an idea for a fifth member, Georgia. Why do I think Georgia? Well, Russia did invade Georgia back in the 1st of August 2008. So nothing's stopping Russia from invading Georgia again. So, so we have our 5 joining members of the Soviet Union. But what does that mean for NATO? The modern day Soviet Union is bordering a lot of NATO countries. And when I mean a lot, I mean a lot. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania are all NATO countries. Georgia was invaded by Russia not only to support the people in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which are half countries but not completely countries, is that Russia wanted to stop them from joining NATO to have NATO bordering Russia, even though Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania all border Russia. And plus, they were previously invaded by the Soviet Union by Stalin, so there's nothing stopping Russia from invading them again. But they have multiple invasion rights. However, all of them are bad because all of them are part of the Soviet Union. Say Russia could potentially invade, say, Poland. Since Belarus is technically part of the Soviet Union, as well as Ukraine, then they could potentially invade from there and then get into Poland and force communism upon them, like the Soviet Union did back in the 50s. But there's a law in NATO where if a country invades a member of NATO, then every single other country in NATO, including the US and Canada, as well as the United Kingdom, Norway, Germany, and so on and so forth, then every single other NATO country has to get involved, which could potentially start, you guessed this, World War III. But all invasion threats are bad, so there are only a few safe options. And by few, I mean only one, because the only country that won't board the Soviet Union that isn't part of NATO is Finland. Now, Finland is part of the EU, so that is a bit of a problem. I don't know if there's a law that if a neighboring country invades the EU country, that the rest of the EU has to get involved. But here in Ireland, we're not part of NATO, but we are part of the EU, but the UK isn't. So it's a bit of a split decision on this part. But I digress. The fact that the modern Soviet Union could also invade the Norway, and that also were NATO. So yeah. There is one remaining question. Who would support who in World War III? On the Wikipedia article of List of Wars, there is a few sections where some countries that are defending against other countries are supported by some other nations, rebel groups, or something like that. So, who would support who in this case? Well, for NATO, they would most likely be supported by some other countries that support them, like Ireland, Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Monaco, and Austria. But who would support the Soviets on their side? Most likely going to be communist countries like China, North Korea, Vietnam, Laos, and Cuba. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. There are some other countries that aren't in Europe that could support NATO. The most likely being South Korea, Japan, and maybe Taiwan. All of which have deals with America and possibly NATO. So it would most likely be that these three countries would support NATO. Well, 2.5 if you don't consider Taiwan a country, or if you do. I consider it a country and no one can tell me otherwise. But, yeah. Other countries that could possibly support the Soviet Union are some countries that support Russia alone. Like, actually, I don't know who supports Russia, and no one really likes them. Apart from the communist countries, I don't know who would support the Soviet Union if it was eventually reestablished. But if I had to make a tight guess, I would probably say like some of the Central Asian countries. I mean, they have authoritarian governments, so does Russia and Belarus, and yeah, especially like Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan. But there's kind of a scuffle going on between those two, so I most likely say something like Tajikistan. Both those are just my opinions. Now, who would launch the first nuke and destroy each other? Well, two countries could potentially do that, but there's also 9 countries that possess nuclear weapons: the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China, North Korea, India, Pakistan, Russia, or the Soviet Union, and Israel, which I'm not going to show on the map because people will get mad. So, yeah, 9 countries could potentially start the war, but it will most likely be either the United States or Russia, and tensions are already going on between them too, even without the context of this video. So if Russia launches a nuke at, say, Washington D.C. or the District of Columbia, then the United States will most likely attack back, and then attack the Soviet Union, destroying Moscow. They go back and forth, and other countries in NATO and the Soviets could get involved, as well as the countries that are supporting the Soviets in the war. Now, what about non-Soviet countries or non-NATO countries? Well, they'll most likely suffer due to poisonous gas that is destroying the atmosphere due to the amount of nukes that are being launched by both sides. Like Ireland, Switzerland, Austria, Sweden, Finland, especially since Finland and Sweden are very close to Russia, and Ireland is further up north. So, yeah, those countries could potentially be, destroyed by nukes. Some of them could land in the countries and then destroy their capitals. So, yeah, this war is bad no matter what. Okay, so how will it end? Well, I have 2 ways of how I think World War III could potentially end and the aftermath of what could happen. Reason number 1. No one will win. Since nukes are being launched by both countries, no one will survive the war, and every country will have some sort of devastating consequence, especially the world in general, since it was consumed by a loud toxic gas cloud. No one could survive. The United States won't win, the Soviets won't win, no one will win. But there's also the second option. The Soviets could potentially win. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but say if the Soviet Union wins the war, then they could force communism upon every country in Europe, then spread their communism across the entire world until the entire world is eventually ruled under one hard communist style regime by a madman who doesn't even know what he's doing half the time. But that's the less likely option, and it would most likely be the first option where everyone will lose. But that's just my speculation. Hopefully this video was a bit more educational than most of my other videos, since they're mostly joke videos. But I really wanted to make this, and I wanted to see how it turned out. So make sure you like and subscribe to this video so you can see more educational content like this. Not saying it will be the main focus of the channel, but just, a side thing for my thoughts of, and maybe an occasional top 10. Oh well. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure you check out my other videos. Goodbye.